he deals with something else in verses 19 and 20. He adds to that. He says, and we will assure our heart before him in whatever our heart condemns us. There are times in our lives as Christians when our heart condemns us. We sin in a way that maybe we never thought possible for us. And our heart says, you can't possibly be on your way to heaven. You can't possibly be saved. I mean, how could you do that? No Christian would ever act like that. Or maybe we sin again in a way that we thought we had overcome. And our heart says, what are you doing back here? If you were really changed, if you had really repented, if you were really saved, you wouldn't be back here doing this again. You can't possibly be a believer. You're condemned. John says, when that happens, by this we will assure, which means literally in Greek, persuade our heart before him. Here, John is picturing us in an argument with our heart. You ever talk to yourself? You ever have an argument with yourself? I do. I try not to do it out loud so people don't worry about my mental sanity. But there's these arguments that we have with ourselves. And our heart says something, but we know that something else is true. And our heart is just giving in to temptation or sin or it's being persuaded by things it shouldn't be persuaded by. And so we have to go into this courtroom of our inner person, and we have to persuade our heart with the work that God has done in our lives through Jesus Christ. And we see that God is loving other people through us. And we say, you know what, I am a sinner. I did fall. I did sin again. Or I did sin in a way that I never thought I would have sinned. Or I've sinned more than I thought I would have sinned at this point in my Christian life. But God is still working in me. And I see that because I'm loving the brethren. I'm loving other believers. And you persuade your heart with the work that God has already done in your life. John adds this, for God is greater than our heart and knows all things. The point is this, your heart is not the ultimate judge. Your heart is not your ultimate judge. At the end of your life, it makes zero difference whether your heart acquits you or condemns you. God is greater than your heart. He is the judge about whom you have to be concerned. And so your heart can say whatever it wants. The reality is, what does God say about you? And this is what John is getting at. God is greater than your heart, which means his judgment is the judgment that matters in the end. And so if your heart affirms that you're saved when you're not, that's not going to be helpful for you at the end because God is greater than your heart. And if your heart is condemning you, but God has justified you through the blood of Christ, then it really doesn't matter if your heart condemns you because God is greater than your heart and he has justified you through Christ. And then he says, God knows all things. John is reminding us here that before we were ever born, before we had ever sinned, God knew every sin we would ever commit. God knew all the evils that we would do. He would know the wicked words, thoughts, motives, deeds, every evil, detestable thing about us, God knows before he ever chose to save us. And he saved you knowing all of that about you. He didn't save you because he saw goodness or because he saw faith or because he saw that you would do something to warrant him saving you. He saved you in spite of yourself, not because of yourself. And whenever you sin, it may come as a surprise to you, but it never comes as a surprise to God. And this is one reason why Jesus told Peter ahead of time, you're going to deny me 3 times. You're going to catastrophically fail. I'm going to tell you before it happens, Peter, so that you understand I chose you not because I thought you were going to be some shining star, but I chose you knowing that you were going to flame out when it mattered most. and you were going to be a total failure in the critical moment. I chose you knowing that. I know all things, and I saved you even with that understanding of who you are. And so we persuade our hearts. Why? Because God is greater than our hearts. He has declared us righteous in Christ. And because God didn't choose us because he knew we would be good people, he chose us because he knew we had a need. And in his love, he decided to save us. This is a very practical problem, isn't it? Self-condemnation. Self-condemnation. We all go through this from time to time. And here John says, if you are marked by love for the brethren, one another in Christ, when that happens, you are armed. You are prepared to persuade your heart.